Okay, so like here's the situation here. So this poplar grove I'm set up on, this is a couple years ago. I didn't really know much of what I was doing yet. This is
It's a
6
giant
years
buck.
ago. Yeah, right. So like you're in a poplar grove like this, right? All on the edge is sumac, not poison sumac, just regular sumac in a CRP thicket. And you come up to this poplar grove, right? And every dang tree has got rubs on it, historical, this season, last season. What are you thinking when you come to the scenario where there's just a ton of rubs like this? And I'm going to relate this to what I discovered about this spot.
I would say if I'm seeing a lot of rubs concentrated in say a 15 or 30 yard or even a 50-yard area, that's where they're coming and going into that bedding. Either they were bedding there when they went hard horned, or that's doe bedding, and these bucks are coming and going and leaving their you're having a lot of bucks visit that spot. And
Yep.
usually I find that, and it's a lot of rubs, but no major big rubs. It's like a lot of young bucks.
Yeah, and occasionally there'd be a good rub mixed in this particular patch and some other ones on this property, but it was just a highly buck dense area. So yes, I mean that's what's going on here. This is what I thought at the time was buck bedding, right? I thought like, oh, there's a buck in here just tearing up the area. You hear this all the time, and it just makes me laugh. But like people are like, oh, there's a bunch of rubs in there, and I found his lair, I found his home. There's just freaking torn up trees and rubs all over, and like this big buck is just hanging out in here. And that's what I thought was going on, because that's what I heard 100 times, but that's really not what was happening. What's really happening is in this CRP down here, downhill, and in this thick on the opposite ends, there would be does bedded in here. And I always kick a buck out of, or a deer out of here when I come in the morning, and come to find out it was actually the does I was kicking out.
Yeah.
And so the young bucks in particular were the ones coming by in daylight and just rubbing the heck out of this. And I could never put a camera on here to find out, but I found it out over a slew of sits.
Yeah. And I find when you find spots like this, like a mature buck, usually his rubs, he's rubbing for a purpose. It's a direction. It's a travel route. I'm going to run this way. He's not going to, when I do find like the same rubs, kind of different directions, I think I'm getting close to a bedding. It's big rubs, same type of rubs. And let's say it's heading in 3 different directions. I personally think he's bedding close, because he might be, 50 yards this way, 50 yards that way, but that's usually where his entry and exit to his bedding area could be.
So, and you're getting into the next points too that I want to make about this area. We're going to watch this video, and bear with me. This is the beginning of my self-filming career, and it's 1080p, so bear with me. But you were just saying big bucks rub with a purpose, right? And it's a little more directional and probably on one side of the tree, typically, than a young buck would. So if you see this buck rub a tree, what do you depict him doing? Like, what do you think he's going to do? What do you think that rub ends up looking like after he's done with it?
Nothing crazy. He's going to be more forehead rubbing than actually antler rubbing. He doesn't have any brows, a little fork and horn. He's just going to be depositing a lot of scent, and and maybe the small sapling, he's going to push it over a little bit. There's going to be some wiggle room. So maybe if he does rub, it might be longer, taller than what his rack would you.
Because it's a thin tree.
Yeah.
So you're using, and this is a good point to our viewers, so you're using the tree as a gauge of like, all right, how tall is this buck truthfully rubbing? Because of the
because it's kind of hard with the small, especially a tree that's moving. It's kind of hard to get a good gauge on how tall that buck could be, because he could just be leaning into it, and he's rubbing, 2 feet. We don't know, unless you see it,
Exactly. So this buck comes into this tree, and he's actually over marking an old historical rub. And so he's taking a break to smell it, and he is taking a lot of time to do this. But you see how, exactly what you're saying. He's forehead rubbing all day, trying to use his base to make any damage he can. And he does this for a really long time. Here's him pushing on it, right?
Yeah.
So he's going to bend this tree over a little bit, and he's even making it, so see how his head's up? He's even making markings that are a little bit higher than would be normal of him.
Yeah.
But you can see those beams aren't wrapping around and can't make a higher tick mark. They can't hit much branches behind him and do any damage. I thought something that I took away from this, and I've thought it for a long time, it's really interesting to me is that he is constantly coming back and licking that rub.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he is, what that is they have what's called a Jacob's gland. And they have a gland that they can deposit scent on the roof of their mouth, essentially right below their nose. And it's like pasting that scent into their noses is what that does. And so that's, dogs can't smell when they're panting. Well, a deer can almost have an amplified scent. When you see them do that lip curl and you see them pant and open their mouth, they are ingesting as much scent and as much information as they can possibly get.
Yeah, and he's
even when they're breathing like that. So now this rub,
he's pushing good, and you can see how, you know, they rub the forehead, but also like they rub their eye a lot too. Like these young bucks, like they really put the side of their face in there, so they're depositing that eye scent, forehead scent. There's a lot preorbital going in there, like there's a lot happening in there. Like now he's rubbing all the way down, so someone walking by is going to see this rub, I'm like, oh man, that could be a big deer, you know, because it might be tall or it's down low, but you look at that deer, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that deer if somebody shoots somebody, you know.
Look at, he's even got that sap and sinew on his ears, like and it's cool because he has to wrap around so hard. Chris, this is your point too. What color is antlers with what he's rubbing too? You can see all that sinew deposited on the bases of those antlers too. But because he needs to wrap around to get any point of contact with any neural bit of his antler, he's making that rub on 360 of that tree, which you're seeing here. And look at, he's doing that lick in the nose like crazy. You know, he's looking for something right now. That's why his ears were pointed in one direction. He doesn't see any danger. He's going to go back to the rub. And so, he's just putting on some kind of display and trying to do what he can. But in this 7 minutes he's been rubbing so far, he hasn't done nearly the damage of what another buck might in 1 minute. And I think it's a good point to say that, like, this buck is making a rub much less strategically than we would expect a really big buck to be making, a rub. While he's really giving her hell, he's wrapping all the way around that tree. He's in an area just to mark that he has some kind of presence there. He's over marking another deer's rub. He's constantly licking it to try and gauge what it was underneath that scent, like what other bucks have been around, to gauge if his scent's being deposited well. And he's just kind of taking part in a survey here. He's not really like being territorial. He's not being directional. He's not planning on bedding here. He actually moves right back out of this area. He's right here at this point. And he moves just straight back out now into the doe bedding. And so a lot of times when I see rubs like this, and Greg, feel free to tell me if you do or don't see this as well, but it's often in these little thick groves are on the edge of something that's even thicker. And what they're doing, I feel like, in my opinion, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like they know a doe in heat has been in there or going to be in there. And I think they're blazing up what they can without either pushing that doe out or breaking up that area, and trying to lay some kind of claim to what's going on that outside. And potentially, in that case, and what a lot of these cases are, is rubs of varying height, a bunch of different aggressive rubs where you're going to see like a bunch of torn up rubs, but they're all just high, low, whatever, and they're not directional. They're not with a purpose, but they are just some kind of stake of territory.
And I think too, with, I've watched more young bucks breed does in person than big bucks. So it's like that little guy's, he's staking a claim. He's putting the scent all in that place. And if a doe is in the heat and he's the first one that gets there, or she's used to that scent, like him being there all the time, like she's probably going to give it up to that buck because he's there making a presence. He's putting in the work, I guess, to breed, because she wants to get bred. She doesn't necessarily care by who, so it's like in the heat, and he's there, he's going to break that rub off, and that doe's right there. She's hearing all that noise. She might be like, okay, let me get up and investigate, go towards that rub sound. And I've seen that time and time. Spikes, 4-pointers, little basket racks. I've probably watched like a dozen deer breed, but I've never watched a mature deer breed because they're usually off, in a hole. They take that doe somewhere else where they're safe. But the deer, younger does, or even just a doe wants to get bred, so she could be done with it, maybe, because as soon as she gets in the heat, and if I can get bred by anybody, like they're not going to bother me. I'm not going to get for the next week and a half. Like, she's going to give it up to the first buck that comes along.
It almost seems like the younger ones are like Minutemen, so to speak. They don't stick around, and then you watch those mature ones, they'll bang a doe for 48 hours. They don't. It's the old bull, young bull.
And I think it's like the young does associate with the young bucks more too, because like that young doe just doesn't want to be disturbed. Like, she doesn't know what she's doing as much. She's in more danger to move around and get pushed. But I feel like a mature doe has, and every species does this. It's funny because this is actually the reason guys like big boobs and butts is because it's a sign of what is sustainable to carry over our genetics.
Fertility.
Like, that's, yes, it's a sign of fertility. And in women, it's a sign that a big, strong man is the one that will be able to take care of their kids and them. So like, as a doe that's more mature, you might understand that you want a buck to be able to pass down your genes and take care and like be a strong sire to your young, right? But as a buck, you're probably going to wish you had the mature doe that's had the genetics that have passed down for years, that's always yielding the right way. So that's why I feel like you see particular bucks associate with particular bedding areas at very specific times a year. Is because he knows that doe's about to pop.
Agreed.
Even further with that too, do you think that this aggressive sign, like you see a solo torn up rub, do you think that it's associated more, well, sorry, not solo torn up, let's say you just see a mess of rubs, right? Do you think that that aggression is more dominance, or do you think it's more trying to establish dominance as a testosterone driven younger buck?
Or frustration?
Frustration. Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess it depends on the mood, because if you're let's say you're the big buck and you were out making your rounds and you come back to this doe bedding area and that doe's been already bred, he knows, like, he might leave that bedding area angry that he missed the party. So now he's going to go to the nearest tree or bush or whatever and just take all that anger and frustration out on that tree, or it could be, I just got my ass handed to me by, a bully buck, and I'm like, now I'm angry because he's got the ladies. Now I got to go over here and fight for, find something else. So I'm going to go just massacre 5 rubs in a row, until I find the next doe or to the next doe bedding area. I think it's like, it depends. There's a lot that comes into play, like, especially when it comes to like the rut, you don't know why they're doing it. It could be, they're angry, they're frustrated, testosterone is getting the best of them. And now, like I said, early season rubs, they're going bedding the food, they're hard horn, they're just getting their travel routes, and then that second rut, security cover type rubs after gun season, they're usually relocating, and those rubs are like the safe zone, like they're kind of claiming that little thick spot for themselves.